So on today's podcast, we're going to talk about one of the finer elements of Taoism and Eastern spirituality in general, which is the Zhenren, or the genuine person. Now, we first find Zhen, and then for people that don't know how that's spelt in English from Chinese, you can search up Z-H-E-N. So we first find Zhen in the Tao Te Ching. So Lao Tzu's talking about this sort of genuineness that we can attain, or that's actually at the core of our being. And then we find an extension of that in the Chuang Tzu, where we find the Zhenren. So Chuang Tzu starts to talk about this genuine person. And a lot of people will be familiar with this if they read the Tao Te Ching and say the Chuang Tzu, because when they see in the text in English, they see the true man of Tao, or the perfected person, or the authentic sage. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about, if we translate it specifically over from Chinese, they're talking about this genuine person. Now, there's debate whether genuine is the right word, or authentic, or the perfected person, or the true individual. And we're not talking about either man or woman here, because often in the text you'll see the true man of Tao, and sometimes some women get a bit offended by that, but we need to remember that there is no gender in the Tao Te Ching or the Chuang Tzu or any of that. And so, but I side with Hans-Georg Maueller and other scholars on this, because I think that genuine is probably the
most
suitable, yeah. And to have this genuineness that we have at our core, that is kind of the end result of the Taoist process, so to speak, or any sort of spiritual process, is this genuineness that we have. But again, this is eclipsed because of how we've been raised, the roles we've assumed, the people we believe we are, or the ego we believe we are. Hinduism, Buddhism talk about this obviously as well, using different terminology. And you and I always talk about this. This is one of the core elements, right, of not just Taoism, but Eastern spirituality in general. How can we be genuine and natural again? How can we do that when we live in a society that is trying to cultivate you to suit certain roles, family roles, social roles? They're all roles, right? They're all roles.
Yeah, I think to understand what true mean by being a true man is then Zhenren, is to understand what is not actually, I think. And what is not is what the Confucius would say as a gentleman. Confucius' idea of what to be, how it is to be a gentleman.
Yeah.
A gentleman, gentle human being, whatever you want to say. What Confucius would say about that idea will be make your family name shine, play a good role in the family and the society, and always watch how you look to other people, so to dress well, because the social perspective is important according to Confucianism. So to play that role well, make your family name shine, and you play the role as your name. So, more so like sociological role-based idea of being a gentleman, according to Confucius.
Yeah. So we essentially become a hostage to our self-image, basically.
Well, that's exactly right. So this idea of what Chuang Tzu is saying, that Zhenren is complete opposite, actually. And that's what we need to understand first. So when we say just genuine human being, is like, people maybe wouldn't know what it really means, right? But I think what Chuang Tzu would say to be genuine man, genuine human being, is to just be, naturally who you are.
Yeah.
Like there is no such image of how like a hero is supposed to look like, or how I don't know, as a leading by example in society would look like. None of that image exists. You break out of all that sort of a preconceived idea, and you just being yourself, basically.
Yeah.
And in that way, you have no such fear to live up to that image, because you don't have that image.
And when you say yourself here, it's an empty state of being too. It's not like some sort of, like we spoke about in the last podcast, it's not some sort of shape or form. It's a shapeless, formless, empty, spontaneous and free state of consciousness, right? That's what it is. And that's at the core of all of our being. And I think that one of the core points in, and why I also enjoy the Zhuangzi text, is because Zhuangzi is kind of explaining that, because it is a critique on Confucianism, but he's explaining that roles exist, right? Roles exist. So one of the existential problems of being in society itself is that roles exist. So you were born into a family, like you were talking about. You have to make your family name shine. You assume a role when you become a professional at whatever you do, like, you know, in whatever career path you choose. So then you have another role, then you become a father or a mother, you have another role. You know, it never ends, this role. So Zhuangzi is saying that it's part of the existential condition of being human, being in society. Lao Tzu would change this to a degree, because Lao Tzu would say, you know, you have the option to obviously leave society. But Zhuangzi is saying what you need to realize, and what the genuine person does, the Zhenren, is they are not controlled by their role. They realize that all roles are played. That's one of the specific things. All roles are played. You're assuming a role. It's like being a theatre actor. You're assuming a role, but you know that this is not you. You know what I mean? You go on the stage, you perform, then you walk away. So Zhuangzi is kind of saying to people in the text that to not incur any harm or any blame, and to move through life effortlessly, is to be able to assume any role and not be stuck to that role. So this is what the genuine pretender is, according to Hans-Georg Maueller. That genuine pretender is that person who doesn't internalize the roles. They know that it's a role and they play that role. But we need to remember it's played. And see, where the heart of the psychopathy in the world happens is when we all assume the role as if it's our true role. Like that's who we are. You're Gaiyang, you're Korean, this is who you are. And it's like, no, that's all externally acquired. It's not who you are. You were trained and conditioned to be this way. The zero perspective that Zhuangzi is talking about is you need to actually get rid of all of that. You need to get rid of all of that, and you've got to peel that onion back to realize that at the core of our being, there's not an identity there, so to speak. There's not an actual Gaiyang that you can point to. You know, there's the energy of the entire universe, the Tao, that emptiness where everything arises from, and that's the core of that's the nature of all our being, and that's what the Zhenren does. The Zhenren comes back into accord with that zero perspective. They realize that all roles are played, and they play their roles well, you know, and they can move through life gracefully without, getting hurt psychologically or physically. And this is, again, like we talked about last week, this is kind of the idea of the drunkard that falls out of the cart. He can just move with life gracefully without accumulating life's conditioning and life's roles and so forth and so on. So part of the psychopathy, especially when we look at from the Confucian perspective, is that Confucius is telling us to naturalize something that's not natural. You know what I mean? So he has this idea that, so if you look at the moon and the stars and they move in a particular course every day, right? They're doing their thing every day. He uses that as an example that you should follow Confucianism like that. If you follow Confucianism to its nth degree, then you will move in accord with the Tao. And obviously Lao Tzu comes along and karate chops him and goes, "That's what are you talking about? Nature is nature. There's no. You've devised a system for us to follow. This is not. This is not. This is not natural. This is not the way of nature." And it takes Confucius 70 years to even come to Lao Tzu's conclusions that he could have came to when they had this initial dialogue that, you know, it may have happened or may not, but it's in the Zhuangzi. And, you know, he could have realized all the way back then. And we all have the opportunity to realize now, you know. But the problem is, and you and I were talking about this the other day privately, is that people are so attached to this self-image of themselves, this idea that they are their role, they're so proud of what they do and who they are. And in the end of the day, you've got to give all of that away. Whether that's now or whether that's when you're dying, it has to be all given up. And Zhuang Tzu is saying, why not give it up now? It doesn't mean you don't have to, that you're not going to assume any role. Of course, you will still have a job and but you'll know that it doesn't define who you truly are.
Yes, I think in Confucianism, the identity comes from the environment. Environment identifies who you are, right? Like if you're at a job, you are at this position. If you're in a family, if you're a father or mother, you are a mother and father, mother or father. Like, so that environment shapes you in a certain way, and you ought to act accordingly, right?
Yeah.
This is a Confucian model of the gentleman, and being following your own virtue. That's his interpretation of it. But Zhuangzian philosophy is the complete opposite. If this is the question, if environment changes all the time, which is true, environment always changes. If we're here at podcast, we are doing this, but if you're outside, you're doing something else. You're always constantly in different environment. So that how can environment identifies who you are? That's kind of ironic, but that's where Confucius was coming from. But again, in Zhuangzian philosophy, it's the other way around. You yourself, as a true human being, true individual, that you are not touchable and you are unchanging in that empty, the self with the capital S. But yeah, environment constantly changes. So yeah, we play the role of what the environment requires you to be, right? So that comes to the conclusion that yes, we are playing that role according to the environment. But our true self can never change. So that environment can never define who you are. So it's a completely opposite.
Opposite philosophy. Yes. Completely opposing. And that's one of the core aspects of the I Ching, is that there's this changeless reality. I mean, this ever-changing reality. Like one of the principles of the universe is that there's constant change, right? So it's always constantly changing, and the I Ching is talking about this. But then you somehow have to, it's like that analogy I used last week with the river. You have to somehow move with the river, and the river's power becomes your power. But guess what? If you're always holding on to this role, then you're going to drown. You're going to suffer because you've projected this self-image of yourself. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. You've cultivated it in your own mind, and it's isolated to your own mind. No one else knows about it. It's an image you have of yourself. So it's your own private image. And what happens is when we cling to that, we begin to drown because we're not allowing life to just happen, and we go with it. And as you said, there's that changeless aspect of ourselves. Call it the Atman, call it the Zhenren, call it the Shunyata or whatever. That changeless aspect, and that is the one that's going for the ride. It's the one that aligns with the river. And to use Hindu terminology, that's kind of like the masculine and the feminine, or the Shiva and Shakti moving in perfect harmony together. So the Shiva being the changeless aspect, moving with the shakti energy of the universe. This is the perfect yin and yang, like the perfect cosmic marriage. And so that's the cosmic marriage that we have to, wed, so to speak. So, and we can't do that if we're constantly holding on to self-image and the roles that we have. That you'll never have the energy of the universe and the wind of, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, behind your back and guiding you through life gracefully, because you have an image of yourself and you think that this role is who you are forever. It's like in psychology, when they say in psychology that if you are, and this is a common problem, because people say that they never want to change, right? They this is who I am. And it's like, well, we could get into it with them, but whatever. It's better to walk away. So in psychology, they say if you are the same person, or you're at least holding on to your idea of who you are, that you were when you were 18, but now you're 60, and you're holding on to that idea that when you were 18, this is who I am, firmly. Or in your 20s, it's not really defined by age. Let's just say in the younger age, they use 18 as an example. But 60, you're still pretending to be that same person. This is my likes and my dislikes and this and that. And it's like, but like, hasn't life happened in the interim? Like, what's happened in the interim? Like,
in 40 years.
What's happened in this 40 years? Nothing's happened. Nothing wonderful has happened that's changed your perspective of life, or softened your heart a little bit, or your mind, or allowed your mind to develop and grow. It's quite odd, isn't it? Because, especially from where you and I sit, every day we're learning new things, and every day we are constantly, gain new perspectives of our persona and the world in general. And that other people aren't doing that is part of the problem, and the heart of the psychopathy that's not just within Confucian cultures, like in Far East Asia, but within everywhere.
Yeah, what Osho said once, this person was asking him question that whatever he mentioned earlier or the day before, the Osho what he mentioned, and what he mentioned then was something like not fitting. So this person asked Osho the question, what you said previously and what you said now is kind of contradicting each other, don't you think? And Osho said, of course, of course.
Yeah.
I'm full of contradiction. We should contradict ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
That means to grow.
Yeah.
We are growing from yesterday to today and from today to tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're supposed to grow. That meaning that we will be contradicting ourselves all the time.
Exactly.
And that should be the way it is. And people shouldn't take it too strange about it.
Exactly. And that's like if you had a video camera and you had like a recording device and you followed people around their whole life, they're contradicting themselves all the time. And that's a sign of growth. It just happens. Like I would have said something when I was 20 that completely makes no sense right now. Or even yesterday maybe. Who knows? It usually happens like in longer stretches, but it is true. We do contradict ourselves because what we are doing is we are gaining more knowledge of the terrain, of the mental landscape, the physical landscape. We're gaining more knowledge of that.
More knowledge and more life experience.
More life experience, yes. The goal is to get back to that changeless aspect where you can see that. And you're not, because when you're in that zero perspective, like Chuang Tzu said, and you're not stuck to this person who you think you are, you don't care if you contradict yourself. You don't care that there is change happening to you on a psychological level, because that's the way the terrain is. That's the way this life is. When I say terrain, I mean the mental and physical landscape of the world. Because we're constantly always acquiring new information, not just, knowledge information, but just information in general, like what's happening around you, the experiences you're having. And it should soften your heart and develop your mind. This is what should happen. But that can only happen when you've come to understand that you are that Zhenren, you are that genuineness. But the problem is you can never get to that genuine state when you're constantly holding on to that image and not allowing the growth to happen in life, because you've said that no, the river doesn't flow. The river's just a concrete block and you just sit on it. It doesn't move. It's like, no, the river's always flowing. The Tao is always flowing. Brahman is always there, and it's moving your life to wherever it needs to be, beyond your will.
Yes, beyond your will.
Beyond your will. You know, you think you have control, but you don't. You have a control of only a small slither of your whole life. And we've been trained to think that we have control of everything in our life. We control a very small dimension of our life. We can control, you know, what time we record this podcast, when we have tea, small things. But big things on a bigger scale, it's not our doing, you know. And that's part of the aspect of the deeper aspect of Eastern spirituality, is that who's the doer, you know? Are you the doer as an ego, or is there something doing you? Alan Watts once said that, right? Does it do you, or do you do it? And the reality is, it's kind of there's a little bit of both, but it mainly does you, you know. And that's why in Shaivism, especially, they say you don't need to try too hard, because the will of Shiva is the one that's going to determine your fate. You know, that's going to determine your life. And people think that is fatalistic, because they want to believe that, but I have control, I'm this person, I want to maintain my self-image. But it's interesting once you start to let go, and you let that, okay, Shiva's in control, give it all up to him, you know what I mean? Like, just everything is Shiva, just let it roll. And then you'll notice that things begin to happen in your life. And you'll notice that your mind becomes more peaceful and tranquil, because you're not trying to hold on to this image. It's frightening, you know, one of the most frightening parts of Eastern spirituality for people who come across it is this idea of that you need to give up this image of yourself, because it doesn't exist. Okay, I was born Jason, I'm born Australian, I have all of these, you know, adaptations that I've acquired through my life, but they don't define, they're not me. You know what I mean? And this is what really frightens people. What do you mean? You're not Australian? Of course, Australia is a concept. It's a concept. Jason, the idea of that name, is a concept. It has a social significance, but that's all it has. It's a role that's played in the society. Eastern spirituality at its core is you've got to peel those layers of the onion back. That's not me, that's not me, that's not me. So who am I truly? You've got to discard it all. And this frightens people, because when they come across Eastern spirituality, especially Westerners who are new to it, they come across it, they think that, this is going to be great. Like, you know, it's to do with self-development and, you know, self-improvement. And it's like, no, it's not. It will improve your life, but it'll improve your life because it's trying to get rid of all of the conditioning that you've acquired in life. Yeah, so like, it's all conceptual. And like, in all of the great traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, they say you got to get out of this nama-rupa, this habit we have of identifying name and form, and this builds a whole dualistic matrix for yourself where you think you understand the reality, but this is actually what's confusing the reality for you. We have, sure, like what Chuang Tzu said, we need to play our roles, because, you know, otherwise there's nothing wrong with this, but you'll become an avadut or a sadhu, or you'll do what Lao Tzu said and just leave the society. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to say there's anything wrong with that, but most of the people who are watching on YouTube, and you and I, we live in society. So how do we cope with that? Well, the idea is that to become genuine again, you've got to understand that these are all acquired. These concepts, these name and form that you have, are all acquired. And you need to, in a sense, let go of them. Otherwise, you can't ever understand the deeper elements of Eastern spirituality, and especially what we're talking about today. You can't understand the Zhenren, what it means to be that Taoist sage, so to speak, that genuine person. You won't understand, because you are operating on the level of ego, of self-image, and everything you perceive, your behavior, is all operating from this downloaded concept of yourself, not from the hard drive. You know, you need to
From outside, externally.
externally, yeah. So you've downloaded that, right? And then you have that image in your mind and you think that it's who you are and you're operating from that. You're behaving from that. This is who I am and blah, 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 blah. But you're not operating from the hard drive. The hard drive is the genuineness, is that spontaneous and free state of consciousness. That's what the Xiao Yao Yu in Chuang Tzu is. The Xiao Yao Yu is that free and easy wandering of Chuang Tzu, where you are at complete ease with life and you have become nature again. You're spontaneous, you're free, you've become nature again.
Yes, we have this trouble from breaking that ego away from ourselves. And we were conditioned since a very young age, and probably most of our parents were also conditioned in that way. So we were all raised that way. And we have very thick idea of who we think we are. We define ourselves with names, nationality, gender, role, between the siblings, who's brother, older brother, younger brother, whatever. All these little things, positioning ourselves to be who we think we are, and we're supposed to behave accordingly, which indoctrinated us entire our life, actually. And it became like habit of our thinking and motive of behavior as well for whole entire life. And it's so hard to break away from it. But what I find it really interesting is that, like, once you realize this is actually, we have been deluding ourselves for whole life, basically, right?
Yeah.
And once we realize that we, in society or at home, nothing will really change. You will be called in the same name. You'll be at a job in the same position, at the same job. You'll be at the same place. You'll be living a similar lifestyle. But what actually entirely changes the way you think about yourself, and like where your thoughts and actions are coming from. You no longer come from the idea of what role that you are playing at that moment anymore. You understand your role at that moment, but you also know that that role is not you. That's very kind of fine, people say, like a walking on a razor blade, like that fine line that you get to, but you are able to stay there with a good balance, actually. Yeah. You don't get drawn into this role, and you, like, I don't know, you act someone you're not to please other people around you at that moment, and to play that role well. But once you know that that's not who you are, you do play it. But you know that you are that role for just that moment, instead of playing up to the image of what you have to be that person in that position.
Yeah. It's played.
Yes.
It's played, right? So you know it's played. You're not absorbing the role.
Yes.
And you're not believing the role, and you're not a hostage to it. And in a sense, you're not a victim of it no more too.
That's why you are, like, again, that, Xiao Yu, that free and easy wandering. Like, there's nothing to really afraid of. There is no stress or burden. It might be at that moment for a little bit, but you wouldn't take it personal at all, because it's not personal. It's actually got nothing to do with truly who you are. It's got everything to do with the role that you play at that moment, but it can never disturb you in the deepest sense.
Yeah, no.
It can never, disturb you and touch you and bother you anymore.
Yeah, you're not a hostage to it. You don't suffer. See, this is a big thing that people need to realize, is that you're suffering because of that role. You're suffering because of that image. Do you have the role in social setting? Yes, you do. But is that you? No. It's a projection of me, and it's a role a role that I've been given in the society. So why do you suffer so much because of that? There's no need to suffer, because that is actually not who you are. And this is one of the great boons of Eastern spirituality, is that if you're not that role, then there's no reason that you need to suffer. Sure, like you said, you may get stressed and you may have anxiety and you may, suffer for temporarily, but as you continue to do the work and disidentify with this role and know that one day I'm not going to be in this position, and I'm not even like in the position of a father or a mother or a son or a daughter, you're not going to be in those positions one day anymore.
Not forever.
Not forever, because people will pass away and relationships break up. But the great beauty of it is if you don't identify with those roles and you understand who you are truly, you can be a genuine person in those relationships, which actually helps those relationships. So if you're in a job and you have assumed a role, then if you were coming from the place of a Zhenren, that's very beneficial for everyone around you, because you're not being a prick. You're not like doing things according to how you should behave from the role's perspective. You're acting spontaneously from your Zhenren perspective, but you have this coat on of this role. So you have this coat on of the role, but you're acting very spontaneously and free in the role, and you're acting according to what is needed in that situation. Now, this is one of the main elements of not just Taoism but also Zen Buddhism, is that you are becoming perfectly calibrated to the environment. And how that happens is because you haven't solidified an image of yourself. So the reason why you're perfectly calibrated to the environment is because you're coming from that empty place. Oh, this needs to be done. This needs to be done. She's talking to me like this. I'm talking too. Like, we're engaged. The energy's rolling. It's flowing. And then you walk away like it ain't no thing. That's that Xiao Yao Yu. That's that free and easy wandering. That's that perspective.
Because then that moment we're coming from the shapeless place. So because it has no shape, it can fit anywhere. And once that moment finished, then you go back to original state, which was shapeless.
Yeah, shapeless, yeah.
And waiting for the next shape.
Exactly, yeah.
No, shapeshift.
Yeah, shapeshift, 100%.
Yeah.
Because you're just moving with the environment, what is needed. So like, okay, this is required for me today at this job. Do it. You don't identify it. And often you're more efficient at your work. You get the job done quicker than other people who are sitting there fretting about it, like,
stressed out.
God. Like they're really stressing. But you just go and get it done. And if you don't get it done, it doesn't bother you either way.
How good is that?
Yeah, how good is it? You go home and it's like, ain't no thing, So that's the element of the Zhenren. And it's interesting because and this is again how, there's speculation that Zen Buddhism is related to Taoism, because a lot of Zen Buddhist philosophy is very similar to Zhuangzian philosophy when we talk about this element. And it's interesting in Zen because Zen is a training method to make you natural again. This is the interesting element of it, because it identifies that we are not natural anymore because we've been warped. Our whole psyche is just completely turned. It's just been put in a blender, and you've just come out the other end. And so they've identified this. They understand this, and so we need to train ourselves in a sense to become natural again. And what happens is through the training of koans and other methods, even through the practice of Zazen, is that you're trying to be spontaneous but also appropriate to every situation. So this is very Zhuangzian, right? So if you say something to me, I don't have to think about it because I'm not coming from an image. I come from that empty place and I answer you correctly and it's appropriate. Now that's a heightened skill of training, obviously, that only some sort of Zen masters attain, but we can all attain it when we loosen our grip on the roles and the persona we think we are. And we can come from that place which is very spontaneous and free, because as I think we spoke about in the last podcast, the nature of the mind is empty, spontaneous, and free. It has no form. It can react to any situation. It can be silent. This is just the nature of the mind. But we build this thing inside it, which begins to, ruin its nature or confuse its nature. And so in Zen, you have this idea of being immediate, but also appropriate. So you say something to me, and boom, just like a koan, right? The master will tell or ask the student a question or give them sort of a riddle, and if the student just answers spontaneously with whatever's there, coming from that place, the master's like, this kid, he's onto it, you know what I mean? But if he's sitting there and he has to think about it, the answer's too contrived, it's too well thought out. So, and this is one of the problems in society in general. We're overthinking things that don't need a lot of thought in general. So we have a whole society that's contrived. And so we're all sitting around thinking about overthinking things and, the boss gave me this. And then your whole day is ruined because of this one problem you've been given to solve, which is kind of ridiculous, right, when you think about it.
Yeah, we just can't stop thinking that way in that situation.
Yeah.
Like, we imagine all sorts of worst scenario that could happen and how you're going to react to that. And, but it's, again, like completely unrelated in the end.
Exactly, yeah. And we fantasize, don't we? We've all had the situation where someone said something to you and then you've left work or something, and then it may not have been on the best note that they said something to you, and then you start to fantasize, why'd they say that? And you're making up all sorts of scenarios, and the next day you go and see them and it was completely unrelated. So you spent 24 hours ruminating on this thing that they said that didn't even exist in the first place. The nature of the mind is quite interesting because we've all fallen victim to that. It's like what Gurdjieff's grandfather said to him, which is a very hard practice, even Gurdjieff admitted, was that if someone says something to you, give it 24 hours and come back to it. So let it sink in, but don't think about it. And then when you come back, the right answer will come. Especially because if they're asking you something and you're coming from a perspective of the ego, of the jiva, and you say something to them that's from that place, it's probably not going to be beneficial and probably going to be fueled with your own personal agenda.
Yeah, more like too reactive.
Too reactive, yeah. And we don't need no more reactive people, This is why people believe like a Tao Te Ching was, in some sense, was specifically designed for kings. Because kings are very reactive people and conceited people. And so they need, some deeper understanding of life, and they need to understand their role a little bit, that their role doesn't define who they are. I guess good examples of this is like Marcus Aurelius, and you have perspectives like this in Stoicism, where you had leaders and that who understood that this is a role, but how do I play my role efficiently? But then Chuang Tzu would go even further and say, you're not that role. And the way you play it efficiently is you disidentify with the role and you realize that it's just being played. So you have to get good at playing the role. That's how you become skillful. But the only way that you do that is you begin to discard this image that you have of yourself.
Yeah, we need to stop identifying ourselves with that image that we have in our mind.
Yeah.
That's the first and foremost.
First and foremost, and we all suffer greatly from that image.
Yeah, I found really interesting reading some books and things like that. Like as you mentioned previously, that there is so much similarities in the Zen Buddhism and Zhuangzi. And actually nowadays the modern psychologists would come up with this study saying that when we attach ourselves with this idea of I as a subject and me as an object, and mine, like the possessive thing, what you own, what you think that you own, this is mine, that sort of idea. If these ideas are strong and stronger it becomes, you will suffer more you will suffer, more you identify with these ideas. But again, so if you get away from that idea, then what? Then suffering starts to dissolve. And what in Buddhism it says that anicca, that everything changes. And so there cannot be this solid idea of who we are. And again, naturally, that's how suffering begins, right?
Yep.
But if we understand that truth, that everything changes, then we naturally can be free from that idea.
Yeah.
That, like, I'm sad. You are sad at that moment, but sadness itself can't define who you are permanently, right?
No.
You are sad at that moment. That shouldn't bother you in a few hours' time, for example.
No. Yeah.
You shouldn't be too attached to that emotional state, because that cannot define who you are. That sadness, that emotional state will always change. You'll be sad this moment, but you'll be happy next day, right?
Yeah.
And again, so should we be happy and attached to that emotional state of happiness? No.
Just let it happen.
Yeah, let it just happen. And we should allow that to happen. And also we should allow ourselves to be okay with it as well. That's the process of start detach with this idea of who we think we are. And yeah, we should not allow ourselves to suffer from this emotional state, because it's supposed to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it changes. Everybody knows.
It's a great point.
And isn't it like almost psychotic to think that that emotional state as if it defines who you are, and you get attached to this that feeling you had in the past. It still bothers you today.
Yeah.
That's not healthy.
It's definitely not healthy, because you're still identifying with things that don't exist anymore. It's strange, right? Like you said, like identifying like I'm tired, I'm sad, I'm this. It's almost like we're commentating on our feelings, like we've become a professional sports commentator. But like, and we do it often with our feelings, but you don't sit around going, I'm shoulder pain. You don't do things with the body, right? I'm shoulder pain right now. Because if you're going to commentate on other feelings and this and that, I'm toenail. I'm a toenail now. Because you... So, you know, like, why are we constantly commentating on our feelings, like you said, as if they're permanent? But it's just like something, it's a flux. You know, it's a flux, right? Like, it comes and goes. And if you've identified... See, this is the problem. You've identified with the I, right? So, I am Guy Young, I am Jason. I feel sad now. I feel sad. But there's no I there. There's no I there. This is one of the teachings in Nietzsche. In impermanence, the I don't exist. So you can allow this state to just do its thing, and you're not identifying with it. We're constantly identifying with everything, right? So we identify with everything. I like this. I don't like that. This is how I am. And it's like, but that's not really how you are. Like, how you are deep down is not defined by a feeling or a like or a dislike. None of it. You know, it would, like I said, it would be as ridiculous as me walking around telling people, I'm toenail now. Like, it doesn't make sense. I'm shoulder pain now, you know? I'm dandruff now. Be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? He's psychotic.
But that's exactly what most of us are doing.
That's
actually.
what we're doing, yeah.
Yes.
Because we're going around telling everyone, I'm this, I'm that, and it's exhausting, not just for the person listening to it, but to the person who thinks they suffer from it specifically.
And I find it interesting, again, is that we start to defend it. Yeah. I'm a toenail, so I defend toenail. But it's the same thing, right? With the feeling, and you got, I don't know, got sad because of this happened with someone else. And you will constantly blame that other person, right? Because that person is the one that made you sad. But, well, yes, it's true for that moment. But again, that's just that moment. Yeah. How can't we let that go and just live in the past? Yeah. For some reason, these emotional states stays in our memory and keep like playing and repeating itself all the time. So that makes us to react in the same fashion today. So if we almost voluntarily want to react the same way that we did years ago, for example, then like there is no room to grow. There is no room to become better person and be free from that emotion.
Yeah. We've completely identify with all of that. We identify with it, right? So, that's in the past I reacted like this to the situation. I will react like this again to the situation like this. But the situations are completely different. You sense that they are similar because they feel similar, but they're not entirely similar. So if you're going to react to it with anger or aggression, then it may not work this time. It may have worked in the past for you, right? But it may not work this time. And the big problem is this identification with everything, this I that we think we are, is going around, and we're addicted to it, right? We are addicted to this I. And as I mentioned earlier, Eastern spirituality is about getting beneath that and realizing that that doesn't exist. Okay? So we don't want to give that up. It's funny how a lot of us are. We don't want to give our persona away because we're comfortable with it. No, but this is how I react in these situations. This is what I do when this happens. And it's like, but none of that exists. You need to get rid of all that. And it's frightening for people because they're like, yeah, but what will be left? Yeah, exactly. You won't have to suffer no more. You won't have to be a victim of your emotions and your feelings. And you won't have to commentate on everything that's happening in your life. You won't have to be that certain individual because you're getting rid of that.
Yeah, you won't suffer anymore.
You won't suffer anymore.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that emptiness of no person, no I, is frightening, right? For all of us when we first come across Eastern spirituality, because we think, I want to be somebody, right? Like I got to be somebody, but you're not, and you never will be somebody. You'll have an image of yourself as somebody.
That somebody itself an illusion.
Doesn't exist. It's a mirage. That's Maya. That's the great illusion of reality, that this person that you've developed in your mind exists. It doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, sure, you have a role and you do these things and this and that, but they're all like waves in a great ocean. You are the ocean, but you're identifying with waves. And look at that wave there, and the wave's gone. It's like, damn, I thought there was a wave there. But what you really see is just the ocean. And it's just frightening for people because they want to believe that surely I've got to be somebody in life. And no, you don't. I mean, this is the great illusion that you need to be somebody, you have to achieve all this and that. This is all modern culture telling people that they should be doing something and that they lack everything. You don't lack anything because you are connected to the source of the cosmos. You are the Atman, which is Brahman. You lack nothing. Society is telling you lack because it wants you to engage in the society. It wants you to be a player. And Eastern spirituality is saying, it's a game. You can just hit the game over button if you want, or you can engage with it. It's up to you. It's entirely your decision. But remember always that it's a game and that you play the game and you're not an actual permanent player. You need to see it that way. And so this is why when people read texts like, so for example, they read the Chandogya Upanishad, right? And where you had the son who went away to get schooled in the Vedas, and he came back to see his father. His father was just he's a divine sage, but his son didn't know at the time. And then his son came back, and he was well learned, and he sort of looked down to his dad like, whatever, dad don't know anything, like, because he'd been in school for 12 years, right, in the Vedas and all of the yogas, and he learned everything. And then his dad said, did they teach you about the your natural state, your empty state, that you're not even real? And the son's like, oh, you got to tell me about this. And then he gives him all these examples. And one of the examples was the seed of a banyan tree, right? So there's a banyan tree, and he says, okay, so open the seed up of the banyan tree, and what's there? And the son, he said, look, and there's nothing. There's nothing there. He said, that's where everything comes from. You are that. This is where one of the great Mahavakyas comes from, the great sayings in Hinduism, is Tattvamasi. Tattvamasi is littered through the Chandogya Upanishad, because he always says, he gives the example, and Tattvamasi, he keeps telling him that you are that. You're not all of these things you learned. That's all well and good, right? You learned all that. That's great. That gave you a certain level of perception. But if you want the deepest level of perception, open that banyan seed up and tell me what's there, and there's nothing there. And from the Vedantic point of view, that nothingness is where the Brahman is. That's what the Atman comes from. That's what the whole universe comes from that place. And so his dad's saying, abide as that. You are that. Abide as that. These roles that you did, okay, you're a well-learned monk now, and that's all good. That's all good. It's helpful for people, but that's not who you are. And see, this part, especially of Eastern spirituality, is frightening for modern people, because we live in a hustle porn culture where you got to go out there and get it. You got to grind your axe. You got to go out there and grab reality by the balls, and you got to do all of this. But in Eastern spirituality is going, it doesn't mean anything if you don't know who you truly are. And all of these things that you acquire and these feats that you attain, it's not who you truly are. Never will be who you truly are. You can have all the money in the bank, you'll be true in there. You can have a harem of women, like the Thai king. You can have all of this, but it'll never define who you are.
I think what could be a great reminder for that is that just imagine how it would look like when you are about to pass away. How do you want to feel in that moment? Do you want to feel life well lived? I have no regret, no hopes or nothing, no sorry. I'm happy and content, and I'm ready. Or you want to be, damn, my life's such meaningless life. You're just self-pitying and just full of regrets and worries and sorries, and too many past memories bother you in that moment. Which way do you want to be?
Yeah.
That I always kind of remind myself that if whenever I come across some very stressful moment, does it really mean much when I die? Then you're step back and just forget about it. Just drop it. Don't mean much. It looks like it makes me painful. But it doesn't mean anything in the end, because at the end of the day, we want to be ultimately happy and content, right? Peaceful, being peaceful. That's what everybody wants.
Exactly.
Yeah. Then I want to be this famous person. It's not really you. And actually, you mentioned that once, actually when you see your idol or role model, they're a 24 hours day, how busy they are, so many commitment they have to fulfill, and this and that. When you follow their life as a third party, do you want to really be like that person?
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Does that life really fit you, you think?
You're seeing just that small aspect of their life too, aren't you?
That shiny
part, yeah. It's like looking at someone's hair, and all you're doing is looking at their hair, but you're missing all of this. The hair is so great, isn't it? And it's like, do you know what's under the hair? You don't know what's under the hair.
Smelly, filthy,
Yeah, like this, yeah.
all of above.
So, yeah, it's just, like what you said, that's what I try to always put in perspective, is that, does it matter? You know what I mean? Because on your deathbed, a life well lived is one that was just content and happy, and you live with no regret. You don't have regret. There is no regret. I think that when people live with regret is when they have a projection of who they think they should have been, and it's based again on comparison.
Yeah, I would say you lived borrowed life.
A borrowed life, yeah.
Not your life.
Yeah. You know, I got like a private story. You know this story. It's like when Dad was dying, right, of cancer, and my brother was there. I wasn't there, unfortunately. And he said to my brother, God must hate me, you know.
Yeah.
And Dad, my brother was like, come on, Dad, you never... My brother was pretty blunt about it, but he's like, come on, like, you never believed in God. I mean, it's pretty emotional to talk about, but it's... You know, I use my dad as an example because I don't want that to be the conversation I'm having if I had a son. What I'm having with whoever is there if I was dying, that's not the conversation I want to be having. You know what I mean? So like, you can't have regret, and like, and actually for my father, there was nothing to really regret. He lived a good life. You know what I mean? He had a troubled upbringing, but a lot of people do. You know what I mean?
But I think actually what he said in that moment actually came from really pure place too, I think.
That's true too, you know, that's true. Yeah.
Him being pure heart in that moment.
Yeah.
And he was able to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. But yeah, you know, it's we just can't have that regret. We can't, and again, like, it's not that you need to have like empty faith about things. Like, I think that it, you know, one of the main things that I don't see a lot of is that people are making happiness a priority. You and I, because, you know, you and I, we know each other, we live our life together. Two things that we always focus on is that happiness is a priority and also quality of life. So is this where you want to be in this moment? No. Well, maybe we should move. Try something different. But not think anything about it. We're not attached to where we're living or this and that. And also our happiness. Are we happy? Now, obviously happiness itself is a shapeshifter because things that make us happy in a personal way can change. But usually for you and I, it's usually being around in the great places where the great temples are, and you know, we're usually absorbed in the great knowledge. This is what makes us happy. But it's probably not going to be what makes everyone else happy on a personal level, and that's all well and good. But I don't hear a lot of people saying they're making happiness their priority, because I hear a lot of people saying, I'm making financial freedom my priority, I'm making having a family my priority, being a good father or a mother my priority. And it's like, that's noble. But are you making happiness a priority? Because if you make happiness a priority, all of that's going to work itself out, because you're making happiness a priority. And that will probably entail, you know, having good relationships with your kids or with your spouse or with your friends, or doing things that interest you, you know. Why not make it your priority? A lot of people, as you know, email me and ask me, like, where should I go, or what can I do to get so absorbed in Eastern spirituality as you are? And just follow whatever makes you happy. You want to go to India? Do it. You know, go. Go and sit at the Bodhi tree for 6 months.
No excuses.
No excuses. Don't have to. The excuses come from who you think you are, that person you think you are. Oh, but you know, if I break my lease, and
they come from the insecure mind.
Insecure mind, yeah. They come from that self-image again. Doesn't exist. If you want to roll with spontaneity, if the spontaneity is telling you, hey man, and you're hearing it through your intuition, it's time to roll. We need to get on a train in India, and we need to just be traveling the subcontinent and just rolling through this joint. Just get that ticket and get it done. And if you don't have the money to do it, work towards that. Make calculated steps to work towards that. But don't be a victim of like procrastination, of suffering from your own self-image, of trying to stay within your comfort zones. Don't be a victim of this. Comfort zones are an illusion. A comfort zone is built on the image you think you are. So, Guyang's a Korean. She should act this way with her parents. She should do this in Korean culture. And this is all BS. You don't have to do any of that. You can just be who you truly are. And if they don't like you, it doesn't matter. You don't need to be none of us need to be a hostage to other people's projections of who we are.
Yeah, we have no obligation to please other people.
Never.
We have absolutely have no obligation.
Never. If they don't accept you as you are, that's their problem and not your problem. That's it. There's nothing more to think about. And it doesn't matter whether they're your family or not. There's still nothing more to think about. Because who you truly are deep down within is empty, spontaneous, and free. And that's the Zhenren. And that's who you truly are. You're not truly Guy Young, and you're not truly someone who has to abide by these Korean odes and the culture and so forth and so on. You don't have to do this. I don't have to do it as well. This is how an Australian should behave. This is how an Australian should be in the pub every Friday night, and so forth and so on. And I'm not there. You won't see me there. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with appearing awkward in a culture, but it's not awkward for me because I'm coming from that place. I don't care about the projections of other people, and so we all have to get to that place, and that's actually frees you from your suffering, and it's actually refreshing for other people in the end, because I remember working when I had a job over 10 years ago. It was refreshing for the people at my job the way that I was, because I wasn't like the average Joe. And so you actually develop good friendships in that even more deeply, because you're not the typical prototype of what the culture is producing.
And deep down, that's what everyone else wants to be as well.
100%. 100%. It's like, when someone asked Joseph Campbell in the Mythos series, if any of you guys have watched it, get out there and watch it. But someone said, like, what do you define yourself as, Joe? Like, do you define yourself as, like, because, you obviously speak a lot about Eastern spirituality. Do you find yourself as a Vedantist, a Buddhist, a Taoist, or maybe you're a Christian or whatever? And he just said, man, I'm a maverick. I'm just a maverick. Just, And that's actually wild. And that's actually the Taoist way, actually, is being a maverick. You're completely okay with the nature that you've been given, So we all deep down are the Zhenren, but we're like different varieties of flowers, right? Like you've got like the rose here, and then you've got the daffodil here, So you've got these different flowers, same essence, but the flowers are different. And it's about following that lead, that organic pattern that you have. And me and our good friend, and he's a fellow Taoist teacher, Damo Mitchell, we were talking about this a lot, the times we spent with Damo, where the quality of the aspect of the rebel in Taoism is actually not understood well. Because to be a Taoist is sort of to be a rebel. Because you're going against the grain of conventional thought and society in general. Look at Lao Tzu. I mean, fully went backwards to the society the other way, yeah, and just disappeared. And he was completely happy and content in doing so. And so I think that we have to kind of embrace that maverick quality, like that you're free and you're wild. And this also, I was thinking about this the other day, where I was wondering, because there's many reasons why people love India, right? And this is one of the qualities why you and I love it as well, is when you go to India, we're all coming from places that are very structured, and you should abide as this role, and you need to do this. We all come from very stiff backgrounds and cultures. When you go into India, it's a wildfire. It's wild. And I mean this in the best sense, because people are not so stuck to a self-image. Maybe within some of affluent societies in Mumbai, in Delhi, and places like that. But when you talk about the average Indian and the way that they can be very pure and honest, and they have that light in the eye that you don't see anywhere else, is because they live in this wild society where, we're practicing puja every day. Shiva is the god, Vishnu is the god. there's images of Ganesha everywhere. Like, it's just
Gods are everywhere.
gods are everywhere on every street corner, and there's cows walking around, and you can just pat them. There's dogs chilling.
Cow poo everywhere.
Walking through Varanasi, and I'm getting it through my toes, and it's like, oh god damn it, too many times.
Yeah.
But it's just so refreshing because it aligns with that rawness that Lao Tzu was talking about, that wild, maverick quality that we have about ourselves. That it's ironic that when we identify with that, we feel the most peace, instead of when we identify with this very Confucian-like role, which gives us a lot of stress and a lot of burden. We've all experienced it, right? You and I were very young when we went to India, and as soon as you go there, wow, it's just like a pressure valve just was released on your life.
It's like if you were just sitting in the corner and having a cup of tea, and like every moment something new happens. Like someone just some random person approach us, just says, hello, which country are you belong to? And all these conversations just randomly happens, and then next minute this massive elephant walking past, and just the auto rickshaw horns blowing off everywhere, and always something happens, like, and it kind of makes you feel alive. It's alive, and the world is alive. It's breathing. It's happening, like this kind of feeling. And that allows the Indian people to be in this constant, like, a wonders and curious state of mind. That's why, like you said, they have such bright eyes. That innocence is just like
Overwhelming.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. Like, we get humbled so much every time.
And even the way that they treat you and I personally, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, even through my YouTube channel and through my books, and a lot of the audience is Indian, and because of what I talk about, and just the respect in that they have. They don't need to show me that sort of respect, but they do, you know. And I mean, I'm just so grateful to, you know, to have even spent many years in India. I'm grateful, you know, like, and I can't wait to get back there. But like, just that wildness, and you know, I remember you and I tell a personal story. Like, we were staying in Parganj in Delhi, and we were in our 20s, and you're at the top of, like, near the, people probably just to give you the description, there's the New Delhi train station at the top of Parganj, this main street where all the backpackers and that stay. And I remember looking straight down the street, and this is like in the early days of me in India, and then I'm looking and I could see this, and I'm like, nah. And like you said, like this giant Indian elephant just cruising with cars. I'm like, well, you're not going to see that every day, that's for sure. Like,
Amongst the taxis.
Yeah, amongst the taxis and the auto rickshaws, the bicycle rickshaws, and there's then an Indian elephant, as you all may know, is one of the biggest in the world. So it's just, I mean, just
it was a bit like a scene in the movie, because a bit hazy
of
the air condition.
Delhi,
and just this big existence, this big
oh
being just slowly walking through.
Yeah. But that's that wildness, you know what I mean? And that's what we miss. And this is what Chuang Tzu was saying. I don't embrace the plants, I embrace the weeds. I embrace the weeds of society. So I embrace that wildness that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the weeds. You guys are interested in pruning the bonsai tree and keeping all of these hedges but I'm looking at the weeds. I'm fascinated by the weeds. And it's a completely, you know, it's typical Chuang Tzu humorous fashion, because he's completely against conventional way of thinking, but he has a point that you guys are all looking at trying to be this person and to be this prim and proper image, when I'm interested in this wildness that's actually beneath the surface. There's this wildness that's growing beneath the surface, which you are. And this is why Lao Tzu said we need to stick to that unhewn wood, that uncarved block, because that wildness, that rawness is who we truly are. We were led to believe that was beast-like, and that was not who we truly are by people like Confucius, and also like in Western society and other cultures, we were made to believe that, no, you need to be the English gentleman. And it's like, no. Wrong way to think about it. Have you been around people like that? Why do people like blue-collar people? Because a lot of blue-collar people are very raw, very natural, and are just they are the weeds beneath this so-called shiny exterior. But we have to get back to that rawness, and we can't get to that rawness if we're going to keep thinking we're this image and we're this role. We're not going to have that innocence that the rural Indians will have, and the innocent Indians in places like Calcutta and stuff like that. You're never going to know that, because you're going to think you're this image. You're going to think you're too intellectual for being raw or whatever, and you're never going to know who you truly are. That rawness is actually where all the beauty and everything. So when you think about all of the art in the world, all of the art, literature, paintings, music, it didn't come from this prefrontal, intellectual, analytical part. It came from that raw nature. It's the universe speaking through us, through our intuition. That's what's happening constantly, and that's what beautifies the world. That's what brings joy to everyone's hearts, not through rigorous analytical, inquiry. Yeah, there's a place for that, but that is not what is the glue of society. It's not the glue of society. What glues a society together is the beautiful elements of society, the art, some of the amazing cultures we have that bind the world together, and they're all, in some sense, like especially art, is from that spontaneous and empty and free aspect of our mind.
Yes. Yeah, that weed is the nature of our mind, isn't it? That's why we have so much trouble when we try to shape in a certain way. Yeah. Whereas if you just let it grow, let it be spontaneous, then it's as natural as it can be, as free as it can be, right?
Yeah.
And that is just like our mind. But we try to give meaning and shape and all these artificial ideas. That's where all these trouble comes.
Well, have you tried weeding in a garden? You know what keeps happening? The weeds just keep growing, man. They just keep growing. Even if you put Roundup on it, they'll just keep rolling most of the time. They'll find a way. They find a way. So your rawness will find a way. Doesn't matter how much you think. You can accumulate all sorts of things. I can accumulate all sorts of things. I'm Jason. I should be like this. I will try my hardest to be like this. And then the raw nature is there going, whatever, bro. Doesn't matter. It's going to keep growing through you, and it's going to keep coming out. You want to be a bicycle rider now, but your heart resonates with Eastern spirituality and writing and making these YouTube videos. It doesn't matter. You're gonna end up going back to this stuff. You can try and become a bicycle rider as much as you want, like a professional, bike rider. No, ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen. You get bored of it in one day. Your mind's off somewhere else.
I think when we try to pursue this image that we have built in our own mind, it will somewhat guide you in a positive direction. But in the end, it'll counter effect. And once when we let go of all that and we find something that truly interests us and we follow that path, then, we don't know how it's going to look like in the end. End result, we don't know. But if we keep following that path, and you get more interested in it and more curious about it, then it'll just do itself. It'll shape itself for you. And I think that's for a lot of people who are scared of letting go of these ideas and images, who they want to become. But once you find something that you truly enjoy doing it, then it'll sort itself out for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about, oh, what if I don't achieve this? What if I don't become this? What if I don't fulfill this goal and la rah rah. But we don't really have to worry about it.
No.
If we really follow the journey that we really want to be in, then that'll just sort itself out.
Exactly.
We shouldn't worry too much. We shouldn't have to kind of like interrupt with the process. Yeah. All you need to do is just follow that path. Yeah. That's all you need to do. Then you won't be fearful anymore because you won't have any ideas of what you need to achieve anymore, right? You just do what you gotta do, and things will happen for you, open up for you, and things will sort it out by itself. Yeah. And you'll be fine.
You got to let life do you. You're not in control of it. Like you said, like, what are you going to do? You're going to have all these regrets that you didn't accomplish what you set out to do, or who cares? At the end of the day, who cares, right? You know who cares? You care. Most of the time, we're thinking that other people care about maybe our lack of achievements in life or this and that, but it's you are the one that's focused on your achievements, and other people are doing their other things. They don't really care.
Yeah, other people don't really put so much focus on what you do and judge you.
We overestimate ourselves. We constantly overestimate ourselves. We think that, oh, what will people think of me and this and that. Look, I'll give you a little tip. They're not thinking of you. And I know that you may feel down about that, but it's a great relief because people have got their own lives they need to think about. They can't invest their whole life in you. Sure, you get the odd internet troll who might have a crack at you online and this and that, but you know they have a host of problems that you don't even need to tend to, you know. So, and they actually even themselves are not really paying that much attention to you. They may have seen a glimpse of a video of you and just went and you know got all trolly, but it doesn't really matter, you know. We're constantly like so afraid of like exposing that our self-image is bogus. We're afraid of that. What will people think of me? They're not thinking of you. So it's okay. Don't worry about it.
You're the one thinking so much about it.
You're possessed by yourself, and we constantly are doing that. We're constantly possessed about our image and how we look to other people. First of all, the image doesn't exist. And second of all, the perspective of other people doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter. It doesn't define who you are. But that's an effect of you thinking that you're this image and that people are paying so much attention to you. No, you're overestimating yourself. We all overestimate ourselves. A lot of people do this. This is very egocentric, see? And this is egocentric in sort of in an innocent way, because you're trying to be someone and you're hoping that people will see that and that they will respect you and this and that. But you don't need to do that. I mean, it's an innocent, like, it's an innocent outcome of us assuming these roles and assuming this self-image. But you don't need to do it. You don't have to overestimate yourself.
You don't have to be that way to do that. You can still do it without upholding the image. Yeah. Yeah. You can still be a good service of others without trying to living up to your image.
Yeah. Because you see this a lot. You see this a lot with like people who are creative types or even athletes, right? So let's have a look at some athletes. So if you look at some athletes and they're doing one particular thing, right? And then they get a bit bored of whatever sport they're playing and think, you know what, I might have a crack at that other one. Because that's their desire in that moment. That's what that spontaneous intuitive feeling is saying. Like, you know, maybe we should try something different, a new challenge, right? Michael Jordan's a good example, right? We'll try baseball. Actually, he did pretty good at baseball, but obviously not as good as he was at basketball. But a lot of people would say, well, a lot of people did say, see, he failed at it. He failed at it. You know what I mean? But from his perspective, and this is a perspective that we all should hold, I gave it a crack. So you win, you lose. It's the nature of life. You can't win all the time. If you win all the time, you don't learn anything from life. You need to fail sometimes.
Absolutely.
But you know what the moral of the story is? I gave it a shot. That's what people don't understand. People are sitting there like, and they're usually the people who do nothing with their lives. Seriously, they really are. They're the ones that are sitting there with the Cheetos all over their face and in their mum's basement, you know, trolling like, I got him.
Get this idiot.
Yeah. You know, so you don't ever want to even give it any, you don't pay any attention, you know. The moral of the story is that you gave it a shot.
Yeah.
You know, I tried. Look, it didn't work. But guess what? I feel better because I tried at least. But you know what's kind of ironic, and this goes with Michael Jordan's story too, is that sometimes you need to try something else to kind of realize what you're actually good at as well, and to kind of reaffirm your passions in life. Sometimes we just get tired, right? We just get tired. We just need a break, and I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, because we live in such a hustle-focused world where we're not giving ourselves time to breathe. When that's probably what we just need sometimes, you know. Maybe I just need a break from this, you know, just for a little bit. And it's okay. It's not going away. I can come back. And if I'm not as good as I was before, I'll get there eventually. This is the way it is. This is the way nature is, you know.
You might come back even better.
You might come back even better because you're refreshed. You've had time away and, you know.
You can reflect on a lot of things. You can appreciate things what you had in the past from doing that.
Yeah.
And, you were realizing what you're truly good at.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of perspectives that you wouldn't have if you didn't crack.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's an important point, because people just need to, like, in some sense, follow that spontaneous path. Like, this is what I want to do now. Don't give it any thought. Just go out and do it. Just go out and do it. It's like that talk, you know, there's many of those videos that have been done on YouTube where Alan Watts said, what if money was no object? And Alan's point there was basically that you should always follow what that is telling or informing you to do. Like, do you want to be a painter, like he said, or ride horses? Why not just start, or at least start incrementally, and work your way into it, you know, in an intelligent way. And I think that if we all had that perspective, what if money was no object, you'd see a different orientation of the way people do things. And you're kind of seeing this a little bit now with the advent of social media and stuff like that, where people can sort of forge their own path. And technically they were nobody once upon a time, but they have forged what they like. And there's all sorts of things on YouTube, right? There's people renovating houses and they've got millions of subscribers, but that's what they like to do. They like to acquire properties. They like to do the property up, and there's a lot of people out there that resonate with that. And this is a great thing. One of the great things about social media is that element that it's given people an opportunity to express themselves, what they have deep down within, and they can follow it. Back when Alan Watts made that talk, which was back in the early 70s, it wasn't as easy as how we have it now. So for himself, he was a writer, right, and a lecturer, and from all accounts, he wasn't so wealthy, but he did all right, you know, he did all right, and he was well respected, and he followed what he wanted to do. And you know, everyone knowing who Alan is, he just followed the way and he was like a perfect example of a Taoist. No matter whatever you want to say about, you know, some of his alcohol issues and so forth and so on, that's something that he had on a personal thing. It's not something that we need to really focus on. But if we look at his life from a totality, he just followed that way. He followed that path, and then his life is reverberating from his own existence, and we have all benefited from that.
Yes.
And that's another result of what we all can do when we just say, you know what, I'm just going to give it a shot, and I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to give it a crack. And then other people are like, how can you do that? Don't you care about what people think? No. Because that's the conversation, right? Don't you care about what people think? We often hear this from our parents. You can't do that. What will the neighbors say?
Yeah, they feel ashamed of you.
I don't care what the neighbors
Yeah.
say. I have no care. I can dance on the roof naked. I don't care what they say. So, and we need to have that mentality. We need to have that real Zhuangzian mentality if we want to be genuine and authentic. And the irony is, and something we haven't spoke about, is that when you come from that place, this is the charismatic element of de, of virtue. So when you have people who are very charismatic and are very comfortable within their own skin, it's because they are completely fine with just following their life with no preconceived idea of how it should be or who they should be. So they've loosened the grip on who they are, and they just follow whatever is important to them. And then often you see that these people are very charismatic because they're very comfortable in their own skin. And this is like I said, the charismatic element of virtue. So, and when you look at it from that perspective, it's that those people attract other people and benefit their lives. That's the power of de. That's the virtue of de. That's the power element. So, because, as we mentioned last week, when you've let the river guide you and its power becomes your power, that's in letting go of who you think you are. The Tao's power becomes your power. And as a consequence, you become very charismatic and a likable character. Actually, a likable character, you know. And your presence in the world is valued. And so a lot of people are going around going, you know, I want respect and this and that, I want to get this. And it's like, you know how you do that? You let go of the image of who you think you are. That's how you do it. It's too radical to even mention that to most people because they're trying to build an image. But you need to deconstruct the image. And that's the way the Tao can flow through. That's how you will become a charismatic and genuine person, a Zhenren. That's the path. And we see, you know, many examples of that. You know, we talked about the rock last week. He's a good example. Never takes himself too seriously. I mean, just look at his life.
Yeah.
You know, sure, you could say, okay, there's probably some egotistical elements there. We all deal with that at a certain level, but in general, he's a very caring and charismatic individual, and that's because he's let go of. Because being someone with his fame, you can't be so serious, because your whole life is documented. You've got to be, you've got to lack seriousness. You really do, and actually, I think that's been to his benefit, because he's very, he's okay with making fun of himself. You know, but he's very honest and caring, and you can see it coming through his, you know, just in his speech and this and that. So, but that's what we all can have. It probably won't be on that level of magnitude, but from a Taoist perspective, if we align with that river, and then we embody that de is gonna benefit your immediate reality. You know, the rock's immediate reality is the world, but your immediate reality may be Pohang in Korea, or it may be, you know, wherever, Melbourne in Australia, or wherever. But it's going to affect your immediate circle. So,
Yeah.
and that's the path for all of us.
Yeah.
Anything to add, my love?
No, I really love that idea of Zhenren. In Korean, we call it Jin-in.
Jinin.
Very similar. But I remember I read it in high school in the textbook.
Yep.
Surprisingly. But
They're teaching you something worth value at school.
I deeply, deeply, really resonated at that moment as well. And I fell in love with the Laotian and Zhuangzian philosophy. But yeah, that idea of being genuine individual, Zhenren is, it's never enough to talk about.
Never enough.
Never enough.
Oh my God, we could talk for years on this because it doesn't come to an end, right?
Yeah.
But that's also in the great Taoist texts, and also in the great texts of the East in general, is that that Taoist sage is the Zhenren. And it's ironic because, it's not ironic, but it's obvious that because the sage has realized they're not this person and they've identified with their existence is in complete accord with the Tao. They're just an aperture for the universe. They themselves are this charismatic and very caring individual, but also spontaneous and free. And it's refreshing for us mere mortals to be around them because it enlightens our life. You know, we talk about Ramana Maharishi a lot, and at that time when, because that's kind of a, you know, it's more of a recent case where people gravitated around and just were absorbed in his naturalness, you know. And we see this element of the Zhenren in the Indian guru and the Buddhist teachers. They have this very like witty, spontaneous and free aspect of themselves because they're in complete accord with that. And so they can communicate without having filters, which is kind of what we need in the world, because we've got too many filters. We build filters in our mind, and that's how we converse with each other. So it's really hard to get an accurate gauge of what people are trying to say because you're speaking through a filter. That's why it's refreshing when we see the Taoist sage or the Indian guru or the Buddhist master, because they're speaking with no filter. They're a representative in some sense of the universe, the essence of the universe. That's why in Hinduism they say Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is almost like God himself, Brahman himself, like a representative of that.
Avatar.
An avatar who is communicating and conversing with people in the way the universe is, which is empty, spontaneous and free. Nature is completely spontaneous, and they're speaking from that place with no filter, no preconceived ideas. And that enlightens the people who are in dialogue with the masters. And that's the stage that we need to get to. We need to get to that stage where we ourselves embody the Da, and that enlightens our immediate environment. And that's how, you know, if people have these great ideals of world peace and utopias and stuff like that, but this is at least the closest that we could get to. You know, you're probably not going to, this idea of a complete entire spiritual awakening is a bit of a new age idea, but what you can do on an individual level is do that work, and then you will begin to embody that, and then the Da will begin to affect the people around you.
It'll nourish other people.
Nourish other people.
And, change always comes from the individual, because society is a concept.
Yep.
Individual builds the society.
Exactly.
So that change has to come from each individual, and that's each and every one of us has to take a responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you're speaking about the knowledge that you and I speak about, it's difficult to listen to this podcast or watch this podcast or read the material of the East and to just walk away from it like it ain't no thing. It's not going to be something that you can do. You can't do that, because there's just it's the embodiment of truth, and if you don't realize that, then you know you're just turning a blind eye to the way the universe is and your own true nature, and you're not, in some sense, assuming the responsibility given to people who read these texts. This is again why gurus, especially in India, were very careful of who read certain literature. So if you were to read the Vedas or the Upanishads, they were very careful that, I don't know if I should give it to Joe Bloggs, because he's attained no level of like clarity within his mind. That's why they used to, in the old days, they would make someone stay in the ashram for 12 years while they learned and practiced certain yogas, and they learned the scriptures and had satsangs with the guru. And that, as that process develops, then you give them that. But with the advent of Amazon, so everyone has access to all this knowledge. Whether that's good or bad, we don't know. But what is important is if you do come across these certain texts, is that you do embody what they're saying, and you do assume your responsibility with what they're saying too. So you do focus on your life in that way. You do sort of embody what in Buddhism they call the bodhicitta, the spirit of awakening, the spirit of spiritual work, the effort that's required to embody that, and you're dedicated to that. So if you realize that your nature is warped and you need to become natural again, you got to put a bit of effort in, and you got to realize, and you got to start to unpack your conditioning and be serious about it. Why do I react in these situations? Well, that's because you identify with this and blah, blah, blah. You need to eradicate all that to become natural again. And that's how we will enlighten the world piece by piece. Not in a collective sense, but, well, in a collective sense also, but it may not be a total awakening, but it will be a little bit over there, a little bit over there,
We'll play little part.
Yeah.
Each individual will play
Yeah.
small part of it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like Jane Goodings, is that her name, the ecologist? Like she said, which is a very wise thing to say, think globally, act locally. So do what you can, you know what I mean? On a spiritual level we're talking here. But also, with whatever you do. But we could translate that, think, think cosmically or think universally, but act individually, So, and that's how we're going to really change the world piece by piece. And that's the role of the great Eastern spiritual knowledge. And we all have that responsibility, and we all have that opportunity to be the Zhenren. You know that, I know that, everyone knows that. So I think that's it for the day, huh?
It's good.
All right, guys. Thank you for staying with us. Hope you're enjoying your day, staying fit, healthy, calm and peaceful during these times. And we'll see you guys next week.